Welcome back to the Titanium Hangar. This is Mike. Today I want to talk to you about how I can afford to collect the way I do. I collect vintage, about 75, 76, I'm up to 76 vintage toy lines, and I generally collect most of it in triplicate, and that's just the way I collect. That offends people for some reason. But I also collect about 20% of it's modern, and with that, how can you afford to do it? How can I continue to afford to do this? Well, I actually am going to be making some cutbacks. I'm going to be slowing it down quite a bit, although I don't regret any of it. I've been having a whole lot of fun for the last 5 years. I do have a finance channel I was working on at the same time this channel got monetized, but that channel didn't take off because, and I'll tell you why, exactly why, people want to see get rich quick videos. Now, the YouTubers that are the millennial YouTubers that are out there, like some of them, are readily available to give you some get rich quick kind of schemes, and those don't always work out. That's not the kind of content I put out. It took me 20 years to get here type of content. Now, one of the things that I'm not going to put a link to it now, I'm going to wait till the right time, because finances are tethered to politics. I don't want this channel to be political. I want this to be a safe space for everybody to go to and enjoy, but I really want everybody to go get real factual information I'll be delivering on that other channel like I was back in 2023. All 30 subscribers. Some of you have found me over there, by the way. So I'm going to get into telling you my story, and I'm also going to tell you two of the craziest things I did to fund collecting coming up. Alright, so first of all, I want to start with when I was 12 years old, I had a paper route, and that's one of those things that really does sort of develop a sense of the value of a dollar and how hard you had to work waking up at 2:30 every morning to deliver papers every single day, 365 days a year. But also back in the olden days of it, in the early days of it, you had to deliver in the morning and the afternoon. So when you got out of school, you're still delivering papers before you could even do your homework and then go hang out with your friends. So that made it a little bit tough. My first job was at a fast food joint, and I was making $4.35 an hour. That's when I learned about taxes and Social Security and Medicare and all that kind of stuff, and how $4.35 really ended up being like $3 after all the taxes. And that was a big eye-opener and awakening that I went through for all of that. But I gotta say, another step that built character. I worked my way up to becoming a general manager while going to, well, high school, then college. Now, the thing about college was that I was working full-time between 40, 50, and sometimes 60 hours a week while going to college because I had to pay for it. So I paid for college myself each semester, and I actually ended up getting an MBA, a Master's of Business Administration, from the university. But my undergraduate was supposed to be a dual major. I was going to do computer science and marketing. Well, I did marketing and a minor in multimedia design. Computer science, learning to program while working 60 hours a week, that's really hard. While also trying to get a BBA in marketing, really hard. So I kind of had to let that one go, but it still was a lot of work, and I went every summer full-time just to graduate sort of on time. I graduated a semester early. That's when I realized that a college education, maybe that's not for everybody. Maybe not everybody needs a college education. Maybe you should have got a trade. You can make a lot of money in a trade, but it did help me parlay my experience plus my education to go into full service and make a whole lot more. I made a six-figure salary in full service in the restaurant industry and still have many opportunities knocking at my door every single day, even today, if I wanted to go back into that industry. But it was a lot of time, sometimes 90 hours a week, 90-hour weeks on holiday weeks. Now, all the while, I lived my life with delayed gratification. I drove old cars. And it's funny, too, because you could tell people who were financially savvy, servers in the restaurant that were financially savvy, that understood, and would point out that people that drove the flashy cars were broke. People that drove the cheaper cars that were at the same level and same position were doing something better and more productive with their money. And I always thought it was interesting to find those key people, and that was actually one of my servers mentioned that, said you should buy gold when it's 200. He's a genius, by the way. All right, so the advantages of driving an older car, obviously it's paid off, debt-free, staying debt-free, and the fact that, yes, you will have some maintenance you have to do to it. It's still cheaper to keep her, cheaper to fix the old one than to buy a new one for what's now. I mean, it's insane how much new car prices are just skyrocketing. But with that, fix the old one, keep it on the road, and I got another car story coming up. Next, credit cards. Now, I got to tell you that I actually made a lot of mistakes with credit cards. I never paid any interest or penalties or fees or any of that kind of stuff on it. But my mistakes were not using credit cards at all. I had zero credit for a long time and had to use my wife's credit when we bought our first house, which we're going to get into. And credit cards are a good way to actually build credit. But if you spend money you don't have and you don't pay your credit cards off, then it can spiral out of control fast. And so I was terrified. I had an absolute fear of debt, a fear of credit cards, and it's probably my family that put that fear into me. But when it comes to credit cards, make sure you pay it in full every month. And then you end up getting like $80 a month back to spend. You get $80 rewards or something like that. That's kind of what we do. Okay, now with the paper out, saved half my money. I did that. My wife and I, we lived a very modest lifestyle. We saved about 75% of our take-home pay and only lived on 25% of it. That's a concept called delayed gratification. With delayed gratification, we did buy a house. So we bought our first house together, but we didn't buy the biggest house in the world. We actually bought one that was $89,500. We did have to finance it though, and we were approved for $311,000. So this is another one of those decisions. Like, how can I collect the way I do today? I didn't buy. We, as a couple, as a like-minded couple, did not buy the top of our range. We actually bought at a third of our range. And with that, we were able to pay it off after 9 years. So we kept on saving until we bought a foreclosure and we remodeled it, and now we have twice the space. And we still own both homes. We moved the in-laws into our old house, and it's a tax planning kind of situation anyway. Now, I want to say this isn't our house. This house is actually valued at like $600 million, and well, it's kind of down now from the height of the market. But I got to tell you, we do have a pool, and I would definitely not advise anyone to get a pool, and that sucks. But we bought it with cash because we saved our money, and we achieved certain goals before I went hog wild with my collecting. So in the early days of collecting, I was spending next to nothing. Cheap. I was buying everything as cheap as I could. And I have to admit that I was smoking back then. My wife actually convinced me to quit smoking. She used her brain powers, her superior brain powers. Maybe she said had some other powers over me, but she got me to quit smoking. That saved me a lot of money. I estimate right now, this year, that would have saved me about $2,000. Now, back in the 90s when I started collecting these Star Wars figures, and I would buy the cheap vintage ones. But one of the things about these Power of the Force 2 ones, they're almost worthless, but I still don't want to sell them. And that's kind of a predicament you get in when you're wanting to sell stuff that maybe you think it's going to have some value and it doesn't. But I was buying stuff cheap, and I collected wrong in the early days. I didn't go after the accessories. I did end up with some after a while, but I should have parlayed all the money into modern stuff, from the modern stuff into the vintage stuff, because the modern stuff turned out from the 90s to have a lot less value than vintage stuff did. But even with all of that going on, I still was able to acquire it early enough before the prices skyrocketed. Okay, so now how do I collect the way I collect today? I actually don't have an unlimited budget. I limit myself to a budget. I say that once I spend a certain amount of money for the month, that I have to stop spending, stop collecting, and I pass on certain items that are popping up on, say, eBay or Mercari and all those places. So I do have limits to my spending, and it does kind of slow things down, and it puts off videos till much later because I can't acquire the items. But it's something you have to do. You have to have some constraints in your life when it comes to collecting. You have to have a stopping point where you just can't go any further for the month, and we'll wait till next month to work on that. That's something that I've had to do quite a bit. Now, the other thing I do is I sell some of my stuff. Now, this is a double-edged sword. There's lots of problems associated with selling this day and age. This is a fun picture of Dallas Finished Toys, just so we can look at this while I talk about selling. Some of the stuff that I say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and part with this, that, or another, I actually have a serious problem. I go, say I'm going to sell this for $50. I look it up on eBay, and I find a better one for $20. Well, my problem is my first instinct is to buy the $20 one. It may sound ridiculous, but that's where I'm at. I think, well, that's nicer than what I'm even selling, and it's way cheaper than what I was going to sell for 50 because I paid 50 for it. Well, I paid 40, but you got to cover your costs and all that. So I just don't sell it. And a lot of times I end up just buying another one. So there's like a constant cycle that we're into, and something that we're experiencing, that I'm experiencing. So I don't sell a whole lot. I actually sold more to my friends, just giving it to them for what I paid and moving stuff that way to help fund future purchases. Now, another avenue that I take is, of course, the YouTube advertising revenue. And the thing about YouTube revenue is that it's sort of inconsistent. It's actually been pretty consistent this year, oddly enough. But it's not much for the amount of time that you put into making a video. If I wasn't passionate about collecting toys, then I wouldn't be making these videos. That's all there is to it. And with that, I will make a video showing what I make on YouTube when I launch my finance channel. And I don't think we'll be seeing a whole lot of other YouTubers following suit, which is funny because most of them have Patreons, and Patreon shows their Patreon revenue, and it's odd that they won't reveal or show what they make on YouTube. I always thought that was baffling, but almost every finance YouTuber shows what they make on YouTube. Interesting. I want to tell you the two craziest things I did to make money to actually buy toys. Number one, I actually needed another car. I didn't want to spend money. I wanted to rather buy toys instead, collection. And I bought, a guy I worked with was selling a car for $1,000, and I told him I'd give him $500, and he said that's too low. We worked out a deal where I gave him 1 week of my vacation and $500 for the car, and I drove the car for a year, and then I had to do some work to it and stuff. But that was one of the craziest things I've ever done. I gave him my week of vacation. The next craziest thing that I did was donate plasma. I donated plasma, and I used that money to buy the Star Wars original trilogy figures. Now, this is before Vintage Collection. They had what looked like Vintage Collection. It was almost the same exact thing, but it was called Original Trilogy. Then it was called Saga. Then they rebooted it again, called it Vintage Collection, which was kind of crazy that they went that route. But I was crazy because I looked at them thinking, these are not going to be worth anything in the future. I don't want to spend money on them. Oh, wait, but if I donate plasma, get the money, let's go do that. I did that. Turns out, though, it's probably not the healthiest thing to do a lot of donating plasma, and I stopped doing that. So to sum it up, what do I do to afford collecting, aside from the crazy two things that I did? Save money, invest money, delayed gratification, and put limits on your spending. And if you don't got the money, don't buy it. And I let a lot of things pass me by. Of course, I do find stuff on clearance, and a lot of people say, Mike, you buy stuff I wouldn't buy. And I understand all of that, but at the end of the day, I still like having fun, and I am going to be firing up the other channel pretty soon. I hope this video helps people put some things in perspective, that people work their whole lives to build collections. People work their whole lives to get into a financial situation. And there's a whole lot of people out there with much greater collections than I have, in much better financial situations than I am in, and I already understand that. But hopefully I share one or two principles that you can use in your life, but I also hope that down the road I can share a whole lot more. So let me know what you think in the comments below, like and subscribe, and Titanium Hanger out.